So for this video, I'm going to be talking about the Five of Pentacles. And there's a lot to cover with this card. So I want to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go on really deep into this card and really trying to explore as much as I can to really bring out my perspective. Now, I'm going to start out with the RWS card and just to kind of give us a background of what's going on in this image. The first thing that stands out to me is the contrast. In the back, we have this building that's a church, and we can feel the warmth coming from that window. We know that there's a very comfortable environment inside. But out front, these two people that are walking around, they're walking in the snow and they're out in the cold. And it's just a huge difference between what's going on in both of these places. Now, they don't have on the proper clothing. One of them is injured. Both legs are bandaged up, and the other person doesn't even have on shoes. So there are layers upon layers of suffering here. And you can really feel that. It brings out a lot of emotion when you get this card in a reading. And one of the things that I want to point out is that even though they are in this situation, one of the things that stands out to me is that they're not alone. They have each other, and that's something that is special about this card. And I think that's something that we shouldn't take for granted when we're going through things with other people. Those people are with us during that time, and there's a special bond that can form because of that. And I love how on the Tarot of the Abyss, it really shows that in this illustration. And I find that it's a really beautiful image of support. Also, we could have animals that come into our lives that can help. Animals can be extremely healing, and they can be with us and really look past the situation and help us get through it. And I love on the Tarot, 7/8 Tarot Elemental, how we can see that this person is helping an animal to get back to his home and back to his friends who are in the background. And there's a bond that forms here. And so we can help others. They can help, we can help them. They can help us as well. And so I didn't want to leave that out. And also on the Penumbra Tarot, you can see that sort of same situation, but kind of in the opposite direction. The animal's there for comfort, and this person, they look isolated and shut off from the world and down and kind of in the fetal position here and really trying to go inward and just build themselves back up. And so you can just feel that in this card. So I wanted to point that out as well. So those were things that I think are important to remember when we get more into this card and really talk about what's going on here. Now, in my last video, I talked about the Four of Pentacles, and I mentioned very briefly the idea of having a lack mindset and a mindset that is full of worry and anxiety about the future and about one's situation and how that can impact someone and change their perspective and maybe even their outcome if they focus on some of the wrong things. And if we look at the Thoth system, we can see that the bottom of the card says worry. And it doesn't say destitution. It doesn't say poverty. It doesn't say suffering. It doesn't say lack or anything like that. It just says worry. And why is that? Why is that the case? And I think it connects to that whole idea. However, I want to be very careful when I talk about this because I think I've heard people talk about this in the past and how we can affect our reality by the things that we think and what we focus on and who we hang out with and all of this stuff. And I think that it can be a bit insensitive, or it can be very insensitive actually. Instead of trying to shift their mindset, we can be there during the time when they are struggling with that mindset. And I find that that can help way more than just telling them that they can change their reality if they snap out of it. Because I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago, and there was a guy talking about how he was so great at making things happen for himself. And he said that one of the things he said was that if you think you're a victim, you'll always be a victim. Well, and when I heard that, I was like, you need to clarify this a bit, because sometimes we become victims because of other people's ignorance and their stupid things that they do and the hateful things that they do to other people. So it's not necessarily all about being in control of every single thing. And I think that the Tabula Mundi and the Rosetta Tarot push back on this whole idea of being able to control every single aspect and to make sure that nothing ever happens and that we live in this utopian world because of the way we think. And it pushes back on that. And I love how on the Tabula Mundi, you can see that control panel, but it's in flames, it's smoking, and there's an elephant standing on the key here. And it's like it basically says, yeah, hey, things are going to happen. And when they do, you can still find a way. You can fix this. But at the same time, just know that you are on planet Earth. And, there are things here that go on, and we are here together, and we affect each other in certain ways. And so we have to really be understanding. And then on the Rosetta Tarot, we also have this control panel, or I can't remember what this is called, but there are so many factors here. And you can see that there's a lot of numbers up here. So it has a lot of wear, and it's sort of burnt out, and it's breaking down because there are so many different things that can go wrong. We can't pay attention to all these different things that could come at us. Situations can happen, and they can come out of the blue. And you can see that there's smoke coming out of this vent up here. And so it's just overheating and overwhelmed. And I think that if we try to just control everything and try to make sure that every thought and every idea that comes from us is somehow this fine-tuned machine, then that right there can lead to a burnt out situation, because we are going to have to face the facts that, we do have our fears and worries, and that's a part of being human. So the next card that I want to look at here is from the Tarot Physics, and it says Waite on the top, and it deals with gravity. And you can see that there's a scale here, and there are some things on the scale that are weighing it down. And it has it brings to mind this idea or concept of the weight of the world. And I think that when we live here, there is a certain weight that the world can put on us at certain times. When the elements are working in a way to really shift that weight in a certain direction, it's sort of one-sided. And what I mean by that, I think I can explain it better by looking at the Tarot of Stars Eternal here, or Liber T. And you can see that there's Taurus. So this card is the energy of Taurus. But you can see that there's this massive pillar here, and it just feels heavy. Taurus is a very earth energy, and it has a lot of weight to it. And it's pressing down on these other elements here. So these other elements, if we look at the Thoth card, I think we can see them a little bit better. They are the Hindu version of the 5 elements. So you have fire, which is this triangle here. That's the one that we typically see for fire. That one's not different. But at the same time, it has this sort of pink hue, meaning that it's not an intense fire. So it is a fire that really does lack. It's a fire that is sputtering and not really, we're not able to really have a lot of energy. When we worry, we have anxiety and stress, and we're in painful situations. Sometimes we can lack energy. And then we have a square here, which represents earth. And then we have a circle, which represents air, and it's blue. So it's about communication. And it's about the fact that it's hard to ask for help sometimes because we feel embarrassed, or it's hard to really communicate how we feel because there's so many aspects to it, and it's difficult to explain it sometimes and what we've gone through. We have the silver crescent moon here for emotion. So the moon's about emotion. So there's a lot of emotion involved here. And then at the bottom, we have a black egg, which is about spirit. And the thing about this is, if you look closely here, this is an upside down pentagram. And usually that's an indication of something that is a little bit more on the challenging side, and on the side that is going to be something that we have to really work through. And these elements up here are weighing down on the spirit. We tend to focus on our toil and on our ability to dig ourselves out physically. And we can see on the Tarot of Stars Eternal, we can see that. We can see at the bottom of that card, there are these people with shovels. And it's this idea of trying to dig your way out with all your physical effort and really not connecting spiritually. And I love this card by on the 78 Tarot Ecological. And the reason why, and I don't think the artist really meant to convey this, but when I looked at this, it reminded me of what I just talked about, because you have this figure here and you have this symbol up here, which is very, has a sacred geometry feel to it. And in his hand, he has these coins that are levitating. And it's almost like you have this powerful spiritual energy around all of this garbage and trash and in an alley and homeless and broken and weighed down by the world. But there's this power that lies beneath that's hidden and shrouded in this cape. And I find that sometimes our power and our greatest parts of us can be weighed down by the energy of the world. And so this card is actually Taurus, but it's also Mercury in Taurus. And I think that that's a really good combination, but at the same time, it falls on the tree of life in a Sephirah called Geburah, which the 5, if it's a number 5, it's going to fall in that Sephiroth. And that Sephiroth is the area of Mars, and it's a very intense energy, and it's a very chaotic type of world of war and of destruction and of change and of transformation. And so when you get them in that situation, there is all this stuff going on around it that's really smothering and holding back the true energy that wants to come forward. So I wanted to really point that out. I think that there's beauty that can come from that. And on the Science Tarot, we can see that sort of image. We see this fiery background. This is about catastrophe, and these are cyanobacteria that have been around for so long, and through all the harsh conditions on Earth, they learned to, or they were able to provide their own food through photosynthesis, and they have been a spark that have been able to provide oxygen in this world and to really change and transform the world and make it what it is today. So the next 2 cards that I want to look at, they are more on the artistic side, but I wanted to include them because I feel like I love when a card can show me the images of the RWS or the Thoth system in an artistic way, but bring out these brilliant thoughts and really wrap it up in a beautiful way. And one deck that I got not too long ago was the Surrealist Tarot, and I've used it a couple of times in my videos. But I find that when I first got it, I was looking at the images and I was like, there's so much there. Are they really focusing on what this card says? And this was masterfully done, because it really does. And if you really pay attention to these cards, you can find so many layers. So when I look at this card, I see this person juggling these pentacles, but their hands are inside of this tree. So they're limited in that control, just like we talked about before. You can't control everything. So as much as they want to balance these things, there's things that are going to happen. And we also have these people walking on these crutches or stilts, but look at what they're walking on. You know, they are walking in a place where they really don't have a lot of options here to really navigate this area. It's very difficult. And even that safety net can be an issue. One of these guys has like the propellers on his head, and it's almost like he's trying to think ahead, like, what can I do to protect myself in case something happens? But if you look at that hat is not going to hold him up if he falls. It's these propellers that are powered by nothing. It's gonna fail, and that whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen anyway. And then on the Petra Tarot, which is a deck that just has these beautiful Thoth-based images, I really love how she takes the pentacles or coins up here, and you can feel that weight pressing down and pushing this sand or whatever it is down into this mound and really squeezing these 2 beams together. And so you get that idea of pressure, you get that idea, but with just these few things, you've conveyed this huge message. All right, so if you haven't watched my videos before, I, towards the end, connect these cards with an element. Now, not the typical elements like fire, air, water, and earth. I also connected with an element from the periodic table to just go down another layer and see how that element works with it. It's an experiment that I do and something that I've really enjoyed over the years. And so the element that I want to talk about is uranium. And uranium is named after the planet Uranus, which is actually in what we call fall in the sign of Taurus, meaning it is in sort of a humiliated or lowered state. Now, Uranus controls our finances and wealth and values, and those things are challenged when we have Taurus and, again, Uranus. The thing about that is that this has been the case since about 2018, and it won't come out of that until about 2026. And so we're in that right now. Now, I find that really interesting because I think a lot of people, are challenged in that. The last time it was like that was, I think, in the 1930s, 1940s, around the Great Depression. So it's an interesting thing when it cycles through and comes through that. It would be interesting to see the change in perspective and the change in our views when it comes out of that in 2026. And so that's the planet that it's named after. Now, as far as the characteristics of uranium and how it relates to the Five of Pentacles, is that uranium is radioactive and it's in a constant state of decay, a constant state of breaking down. And that decay can cause a lot of issues. And when we speed up that decay and when we work with that decay in a negative way, it can also affect others. And in fact, uranium has had the biggest impact on the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time than any other thing in history. And that's because it was used in the atomic bomb. Now, when the atomic bomb was dropped in Japan, during that time, a lot of people died instantly, but also people suffered for years and years to come. And I find that suffering was something that really connects it to this card and really brings out the energy of the Five of Pentacles within that element and ties it to it. So I wanted to really make that connection, but I want to make that connection by telling this story of someone that survived this situation. So I just want to read it and, just have you take in what's going on in this case and how they're kind of caught in this crossfire of two countries at odds. These people suffered greatly. And so I want to read to you this story about this guy who survived this situation. And so his name is Kunhiku Lida. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm probably messing it up. I apologize. But he wants the world to know that the atomic bomb the United States dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki 75 years ago are still claiming lives and causing suffering. Lida was 3 years old in August of 1945. His father had died in battle, and he was living with his mother and parents in a house 900 meters from Hiroshima's hypocenter, the spot right beneath the detonation. The blast crumpled the house. The family fled the city, but Lida's mother and older sister soon died from their injuries, a fact the little boy didn't grasp. Until I entered elementary school, I thought they were living and that we would meet someday, he says. His injuries left him bedridden for years, and he has suffered debilitating illness ever since. Childhood anemia caused him to collapse at school, and his ulcers and asthma underwent 2 surgeries to remove brain tumors and now has thyroid growths. There has never been a break in these illnesses, he says. Yet Lida has survived. Thousands of others died prematurely over the years because of radiation-induced cancer, a tally that is still growing. The Hiroshima bombing on 6 August 1945 killed an estimated 90 to 120,000 people who either died instantaneously or over the following weeks and months from injuries and acute radiation sickness, the result of damage to bone marrow and the intestinal tract. The bomb that leveled Nagasaki 3 days later claimed another 60 to 70,000 lives. There are no bodies left to count near the hypocenter. The heat and energy literally vaporized the closest person, and many bodies were swept into the sea with the tides. Burn victims sought relief in Hiroshima's numerous rivers. So when we talk about this card and we talk about suffering, we talk about the things that people go through, it's really important, I feel, that we understand that the world is a complex place where the ideas of lack mindset or our mentality of attraction and victim mentality and the way we see that are things that have its place, but they also can have a place that just does not fit because of the way we treat each other and the decisions that we make that affect other people's lives. And so I wanted to end with that story. I wanted to end with that because I felt like it really tied in the element uranium to this and the things that happened and how it was used and how it really has been one of the things that's caused one of the biggest levels of suffering and devastation in our history. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Will. This is Atypical Tarot, and I'll see you next time.